Hey everybody, KC0VI Tom here. We got a little product review. We have a desoldering station, a WER model number is a 938D David. I was looking for a desoldering station on one of the last projects on the ASU Mars modification. Here in Mitchell County where I live at, the storm spotting team, we operate on the sheriff's channel, which is still the old analog VHF. They want us there, so that's what we do. So when I ever buy a new radio or any radio, amateur radio, I have to make sure that it can do a Mars mod to get into that frequency range that our local sheriff's department is running on. The group radio club in Mason City, Albert Lee, and Austin, they actually still run on their amateur radio channels like they should be, and the local PD in that area and sheriff's departments are on the new 800 megahertz APCO 25 standard. So they'll have to either have an operator at the dispatch center or they have them on the phone and relaying the information, and we'll go from there. So what we have here, when I buy a radio, like I said, I try to get it done at the big box store, either the radio outlet store or at the factory. Usually it runs about $40. The warranty is not voided. Well, this last one I bought, it was a person had bought it in Ohio. He never installed it. And on eBay, he said it's almost like new condition. And I've bought stuff like that before, and it's been used, well used. But this one, it was not in used condition. It was in factory condition. The guy took it home, opened the box, peeked at it, put it in a shelf, said, I'll work on this later, and never got to that one reason or another. All the cables are still wrapped up with the little red twisties from the factory. They still even had the plastic protective screen over the display. And a couple videos ago, we were trying to do the Mars mod, and those components are so small. Up to the mid-80s, this is the 8 watt resistor. It's a red brown, so this is a 220 ohm resistor. These resistors are usually carbon or graphite with a plastic covering with little leads coming out of it. And the insertion machine will actually bend these into a U shape and put it in there and bend the ends and cut them. Then the board is ran over a solder pot machine. It's just a bucket of hot solder, and it solders everything in. Well, to get the components smaller so we can make our radios and all our electronics smaller, what they did, instead of using a small device like this, they went to a ceramic small item, about same size as this or smaller of the body, and instead of leads, it's got solder pads on the side. Usually they were started out as silver, now they're getting back to copper and some other materials, so it's not so expensive. And when the insertion machine puts the component on the board, usually puts a little dab of epoxy in the center of the component. It's put down on the board and it's just the epoxy hardens. And then once the board is all full, they run it across that solder pot and solder all the components in. So it can make desoldering quite interesting, especially on a multi-leg critter. You have to get in there and make sure you heat up those leads or pads that you want to desolder, nothing else. You're not damaging the traces on the board. You should never ever reuse surface mount devices, because when you desolder them, you do run a higher chance of damaging them. This is a little 8 watt guy. I could go downstairs and find a 1 watt 220 ohm resistor, and it's physically larger to dissipate that heat. Problem with surface mount devices, they don't like heat too well. They can't dissipate heat because there's not that much surface area compared to a resistor or large wattage resistor. So let's take a stab at this and see what we can destroy. Well, here's the controller for it. Again, you get your power, digital readout for temperature, and I'm not quite sure where they're getting the temperature from, Fahrenheit or Celsius, and this is your temperature setting. The end of the unit comes with a nice little stand with the sponge pad so you can wipe the tip off. And each time you take it out, the little protective cover, I can't get my fingers on it. Come on. Over that, protect the tips. These tips to me are a little too soft. I dropped it and kind of bent one end. I use needle nose pliers to put it back to get straight. This adjusts, like the course, how wide you want it, so you can actually get into the component, squeeze down, and lift it off. When we turn it on, I'll put that back in. The set point is, you'll show it, then it'll show the temperature. Like I said, I'm not quite sure where they're actually reading the temperature, and it heats up fairly fast due to the fact of the size of it so small. And if you adjust the setting down here, you'll momentarily display the set point then it will go back to the actual temperature. We'll try 800. And we're at 690, 700. And if you take the tip, wipe it on that wet sponge, you get it nice and clean. If you don't have one of these, keep your eyes open. They go on sale quite often. It's a little infrared gun. Makes a great cat toy. There's infrared laser on it, or red laser, not infrared, dummy. It'll tell you the temperature. So if we go to measure the tip, I'm not quite sure where it's measuring, that 800 degrees. So we'll just say it's good. What we're going to play around with is this is a power supply of an old TiVo I had. If you ever have a TiVo Series 3, pop the cover off and take a look at these capacitors. If you see them, the capacitors start doming, the top should be flat. Like that one there is good condition. When they start getting a little dome feature on top, then you got problems. What's happening, the capacitors are breaking down. There was a couple of companies that were selling all these capacitors plus these two large transistors. They make up the multi-vibrator for creating the high voltage. They take 120 volts, rectify it down to, I believe, like 40 volts. Then they use this to jump up to higher voltage level. Then you get the voltage to run the system. What's nice about a switching style power supply, it only puts out the current that is needed. It's not always there like an analog or the old style power supplies that always be able to put out 20 amps or 30 amps. This puts out when it's needed. So, but the problem is when they go bad, they kind of blow out everything else. For like $40, you buy the kit and you sit down, spend an afternoon desoldering, resoldering. Then a company, Weak Knees, came out with a swap message. They send you a rebuilt board. You send back the bad board. And I have at the time I had like 3 or 4 Series 3. It was quite comical because the UPS man would come in, give me the box, I'd take the good board out, put the bad board in, put the new label on top, tape up, give it back to him. He was kind of giggling about that. He thought I was running a business out of my basement. I go, no, these are just for me. So on the bottom side, we do have some service mount devices, and we'll get set up here so we can take a couple practice and show how easy this thing is operating. Okay, we did a couple practice ones before we rolled the camera, just to make sure. It always works in rehearsal, but it never works on camera. We got temperature still at 805. We'll run that up a little hotter. A couple of my practice runs, it took a little bit. We'll go to 850. Come on. Setting is really touchy because it's, of course, hot. Okay. 853, we're up to temp. And we'll pick this little, looks like a diode. We'll see if you can get this on. Go ahead and pinch her down on there. Just let it set, and there we go. Wipe the tips, not too bad. I mean, you get the temperature up there to remove it, and it looks like it did a fairly decent job. Let's see, our next victim will be more of those. Those dials seem to work pretty good. We'll go over here. Let me adjust my light, get a better lighting on it. Maybe it'll hopefully not get washed out. I'll grab that diode. It looks like a diode. Let it warm up. There we go. You can see there's a little red dot we left behind. That's actually the epoxy left over. So again, this is a desoldering station. It's not made to solder surface mount devices back on. So don't think you can get this and repair a board. This is just for desoldering. If you want to solder the components back in, you should get what they call a hot air machine. It's a oversized hair dryer that it's got a small nozzle. You can direct the heat flow where you want it to. For $35 and some money for tax and for shipping, not bad. It was under 40 by the time it got to the door. And if you didn't watch that one episode of the Mars model, the Yaesu FTM 400, the reason this did not work, it wasn't because it could not desolder the station. It's because the component was kind of close to the metal frame, the rail on it, and wasn't enough room to to get in there and do it. Plus, those components are even smaller than the ones I was just showing you on the power supply board. But nice little unit. If you do a lot of surface mount device removal, it's not bad. If you're got any type of shop workbench down there for that much money, not bad, pick up. If you go to WER's website, I had to do a little search, and I did find it is a Chinese Senshai, company from Shinshai. You can buy replacement tips. There's other kits you can buy with these, but for what I need, this works pretty good. Again, I've got this off eBay for roughly $30 and some odd cents in shipping and deal. Not a bad little item. I mean, it'll come in handy. Granted, it didn't work what I wanted to, but I don't remove a lot of surface mount devices for this much money. I do every once in a while get a friend of mine will call up and say, want to put a mod on a radio and they got to remove one of the components. Now, a lot of times these mods, the radio is all programmed up and able to do a lot of stuff, but they put these little shunts of resistors to turn off that feature. So when you do that mod, remember, it's going to factory reset that radio over that device. And so make sure you make a backup either on your computer or on the SD card, whatever the radio has to offer, and so you don't have to sit down and reprogram everything. On that, 7-3 everybody. Be sure to tell your friends, neighbors, other hams, subscribe, hit that bell to get notification when new videos come out, add comments below. 7-3 everybody.